Welcome, everybody. This session's all about accessible travel and tourism. We've got an amazing panel, a speaker, physical and digital accessibility. That's the point of today's conversation, really, is to bring those two worlds together in some way, discuss why accessible travel is important. We're going to be talking about some of the commercial opportunities that are opening up that hopefully sort of demonstrate the value in having accessible travel and tourism. And we're also going to be discussing some of the digital elements of the journey to join up the whole journey for travelers and tourists. We've got an amazing panel. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is ask Fred and Tony in particular. So Fred, you're about to launch a new, I don't know, is it a TV show? It's an online show. So could you tell me briefly about the nature of the show and what you're going to be doing in it, and along the way tell us why it's you that's doing it in the sense of the work you do at the moment?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mark. And first, thank you for having us today, and thanks to my fellow panelists and especially Tony. So here's a worldwide exclusive, I guess you would say. We've been working on this for quite a while. It's an idea that I've had for quite some time. So I'm a wheelchair user. I became a paraplegic when I was 18 years old. And since that time, a bunch of years ago, I'll just say, was fortunate in my corporate career, throughout my corporate career, to travel all over the world. And in doing that, I was able to experience firsthand what accessibility meant. And unfortunately, there are about 1 million definitions, as we all know, as we travel and encounter different things, not just from a mobility perspective, but I look at it broadly. And 3 years ago, I left my corporate career to devote my full time to serving people with disabilities around the world. And in doing so, earlier this year, I connected with former colleague, my friend, and now business partner Tony on an idea that I had to let's have a show. It's an all digital show about accessible travel and why it's important and what it means. And so, we looked at the numbers, and when you look at that huge number of, close to 1.5 billion people around the world reported that have some type of disability. And this new number, by the way, that as an ambassador for Purple and Mike Adams and his team, I was in Minnesota to launch Purple Tuesday there. And Charlene Overend hits me with this new number of $13 trillion in disposable income for the purple pound, the purple dollar, the disposable income for people with disabilities around the world and their family members and caregivers. But they're only spending about 43% of it. So we have this idea. We're going to go travel around the world. We're going to experience food, culture, people, things. We're going to showcase assistive technology, and we're going to motivate people with disabilities to get out there and travel for all the right reasons, especially that it's good for mind, body, and soul. And oh, by the way, that thing that hangs over many people's heads, accessibility and inclusion, will be interwoven into each episode. It's not a tutorial. It's not a how-to. It's not to point fingers, but through the interaction that I will have, and Tony will describe this in much greater detail with my co-host, the viewers will experience really what it is to have a disability and encounter either good accessibility or not. And we're super excited about a lot of things. I don't want to steal any of Tony's thunder because he's worked so hard on this as well. And we are just super thrilled about the progress that's been made, the people that are joining us, the organizations that are joining us, and you name it. And it really, at the end of the day, it all comes back to people, and regardless of their ability, but especially for those with disabilities, their ability to get out and explore the world with or without some type of assistive technology, but with the power and the knowledge of where to go, how to go, and who to go to help them get there. And we just could not be more pleased to do this. And with that, I want to shoot it over to Tony.
That's fantastic, Fred. I know. Sorry, Tony, just before we jump in, I know, Fred, when we met and talked about it, this is, like you say, a passion project for you as well. Just sharing those stories. That's the start of it, isn't it? Making sure that people hear, obviously, that broader awareness that comes from that, because hearing different people's stories in different places is the whole point. It's
That's
not
correct.
one size fits all.
So each
Tony,
of my, I'm sorry, Mark, just quickly,
yep.
Each of my co-hosts, I'll have a co-host in each location that will be well known in that location around the world. They will have some type of disability. We want to be as diverse as possible with how disabilities are portrayed and how disabilities are encountered. So we're going to make the show, as inclusive as possible and as meaningful as possible to all demographics. I'll say that.
So Tony, this isn't. When I was saying about for Fred, this is the passion project. For you, this is a TV show, or this is your background, isn't it? You're a producer, and you can see an opportunity here for an audience. You can see an opportunity to reach across lots of different demographics, I guess, in terms of the different people here. And I'm guessing that you think the advertisers are going to be lining up to pay for it to happen as well. I'm guessing you're seeing it principally that way as the starting point.
Well, I'll say this, Mark. So brief background. Yes, I've been in production in some capacity, from Comcast, NBC Universal here in the United States to now representing, I would say, the majority of the world's largest hospitality brands, travel destinations I also work with as well. And we consult on how to tell beautiful stories and destination travel stories. And, I'll say this, I will say from an impact standpoint, let's start small. I always like to start with something that is very understandable and relatable on a personal level so that I can connect. I would say back in January is when Fred and I connected on this, and this concept. The week prior, I had just watched for the first time. I don't know if you're familiar with the series that National Geographic did with Will Smith. I think it's called Welcome to Earth. Beautiful series, really well done. And in the first episode, he featured I can never pronounce his last name, but the blind gentleman, Eric, who climbed Everest. And you watching the show, you don't really realize until about halfway through the episode that he's blind, yet he's experiencing everything that Will is the same way he is, and sort of it immediately had an impact on me. So in my career, and my wife will tell you this now, in the past couple of years, I have a lead consultant that I like to work with, which is my 6-year-old daughter. So I get with her on projects when we're doing profiling a beautiful resort. Does she like a certain drink scene? If she doesn't like it, I pull it. She's got great instinct. So I sat her down and I said, do you want to watch this with me? It's really interesting. And she did. We watched the first episode, and then we watched the entire rest of the series that Saturday. And it had a really big impact on her and on me. Just from a standpoint of, here are these individuals that, in other words, have this thing that may hinder them in a certain capacity, yet they're traveling and exploring the world in a way that is extrasensory, ultrasensory, and they seem unstoppable, and I'm blown away. And it's interesting because I will also say this, I would be remiss if I didn't, in being in travel and consulting in this business for the past 10 years, I genuinely, and Fred will tell you this, before he and I connected, didn't understand the market that is represented here. Fred calls me a week later. Timing just aligned. I don't know what it was. He says, "Hey, I've got this idea for a show." And I said, "Stop right there. You've got me. I understand it." I said, I want to ask you right out of the gate, what is the commercial impact on this? I said, because if you're trying to do something like what I think needs to be done in order to really satisfy and even scratch the surface on this global mission, we need a resource bank that is significant. And you're also going to need a commercial interest from advertisers and folks that are going to be able to fund something like this, because I know what it costs to produce these type of things. And is there a connection point there? And the numbers start rolling out with, currently 1.4 billion people in the world with disabilities. But then, the thing that really got me in that conversation was, he said, but, you're only really realizing I'm the 1.4 billion. it's the impact that it has on the families, those that are immediately and directly connected to this on a regular basis. So the global impact is, maybe 40%, maybe, and growing into the 50% as the age population ages into the future of the world's population. So from there, it's been a lot of looking into, okay, what's going on here? Why has this been missed? Is this, not only an underserved opportunity, but a mission that we can satisfy with a platform and a content and storytelling platform that inspires travel and at its lead. But it also does it in a way that leverages a lot of, let's call it modern marketing and a lot of modern sort of, content sharing, which is, primarily driven on social and social media platforms. And, luckily we have access to arguably one of the world's largest networks of travel influencers who are agreed to push this and distribute this globally because they love the concept they see and they understand the need for it. Some of the world's largest associations in the space that have joined on will also be acting as distribution partners. Commercially, yes, it's viable, but Fred and I, from day one and throughout all of this is we're now on a mission, frankly, and we understand that the impact travel has on individuals on a human level should extend to all people, regardless of insert some designation. And, it's really a mission to normalize the conversation. And, what I would say from a content perspective is, going back to social and content and influencers, we're really just going to try and make Fred look cool and like fun stuff. So, I've got him in helicopters. I've got them in volcanoes. I mean, it's going to be some pretty epic content. And
has he told you this yet, Fred? This isn't the news. This isn't the
Fred
news.
Is not going to look cool. Let's be clear. Fred is not going to look cool. Terrified maybe at points, but yes, not cool.
It's look, we and Fred mentioned it. This series is certainly not a tutorial. I think in a lot of ways we can be a complement to existing platforms that are out there that are tutorial based or that are providing information on logistical elements. Folks that I know, for example, Claire, like bus, how do you get on a bus to get from point A to point B? There's going to be an opportunity for us to direct traffic to those organizations' platforms through our, through our platform. And at the end of the day, though, here it's really about inspiration travel, people, connection, cultures, in a way that, frankly, any social traveler can do. And I'll tell you this. I'll leave you with this. I'm here. I'm on a client trip right now, but I don't know if you can see this, if it makes sense, but if you want to know how big the commercial impact is, I just was walking through the airport, going back to, Eric, I can never pronounce his name. Ian Meyer. But, his billboard, I don't know if you can see that, is throughout the airports that I both departed from and arrived from, about him and Everest. So, wow. Australia and the Premier of Queensland is called the year 2023, the year of accessible travel. We've talked to destinations around the world who have said the same. I think it's going to be fairly explosive this year in terms of growth and promotion of this, mission. So we're excited to be part of it. Thank you for having us here, and
fantastic.
Happy to answer any questions we can.
Tony, I've got a question.
Fred, is there a link you can drop in where we can find out more? Or is it not live, or is there any information there to back it up? I mean, when are we going to be able to watch it, or where's it going to sit?
To be coming. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's we're going to be launching this ideally Q1 on our own platform on a .com, and that information we will be sharing at the beginning of next year.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks so much. I mean, it's a lovely coincidence, Fred, that we picked up on that earlier, and that you're at that crossroads in terms of reaching out into that commercial opportunity. Ross, I'm going to come to you next, because I think that commercial opportunity isn't news to you in the same way, in the sense of the work that you're doing. So, can you tell us a bit about your role, and also the sort of the role of accessible travel in the Visit Britain sort of the breadth of what you're doing?
Sure. Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Ross Calladine. I'm a middle-aged, white, British male. I've got my headset on here today, and I'm wearing a black jumper with a white collar polo shirt. I'm the head of business support at Visit England. So we're one part of the National Tourism Agency, the other part being Visit Britain. And as part of my role there, I manage a work program to lead the English tourism industry to be more accessible and inclusive. And I've led that work for about 14, 15 years now. And also in January this year, I was really pleased to have been appointed by the Disabled Persons Minister at the time as one of the sector ambassadors for disability and accessibility. And I know we've got at least one other ambassador on the panel today. So yeah, my work really is about taking the business case to tourism businesses and tourism destinations and saying, being accessible and inclusive is not just a responsibility, it's a huge opportunity. And everyone today will be banging that drum, and there's a lot of misconception around disabled people. We're broadening the understanding beyond just wheelchairs and thinking very holistically and spreading the message that disability and impairment is very individual and it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. But if you can get it right, or if you can at least start your journey to be more accessible, you will tap into a huge commercial opportunity. And pre-pandemic, in England alone, the amount of money that was spent by disabled travellers and their travelling companions was over £15 billion. So the stats say that this isn't a niche market. Officially, around 1 in 5 of the UK population meet the government's a definition of being disabled, but we know many more would benefit from accessibility. So we're hitting that message home. It's not niche, it's relevant to your business, it's relevant to every business. And what we try and do is provide a wealth of guidance and very practical information that the majority of our industry can relate to. So they're micro and smaller businesses. If you think about the many thousands of bed and breakfasts run by couples, self-catering businesses that might be very remote in the countryside, that's the majority of our industry, and our message has to resonate with them. And yes, we want the big boys, the Merlin Entertainments, the Hilton Hotels, the global chains. We want them to come along with us too, but we're particularly trying to get the message through to those smaller businesses.
This is a long-standing.
Oh, Mark, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I think I specified that. This is a long-standing program in the sense of that you're saying you've been involved in it. So, what sort of successes have you seen, or how are you measuring the progress of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we keep finding ways to shine a light on good practice, and it's always very reassuring when we run our Access and Inclusive Awards category in the Visit England Awards. So we have, like many countries, we have like the Oscars of the tourism industry, if you like, every year. And I love running the access and inclusion category because it really uncovers a lot of excellent tourism experiences that are maybe some of them going under the radar, but they've done so much to be accessible, and we can start shouting about them and push them in our PR and write articles about them and connect them with film producers, to kind of consider to go and feature in our films. And we did a great tie-up with Channel 4 over the last couple of years, where we worked with Rosie Jones, the comedian, and we ran a series, an online only, a social series called Mission Accessible. And if you haven't seen it, I'll try and find the link and share it in the chat. It went down hugely well. And the first episode had over 10 million views on social. And Rosie Jones was going to these different destinations in the UK with one of her comedy pals and uncovering an accessible trip for a friend that she was planning. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, there's the success of those kind of initiatives and how many people are engaging with those that really show businesses that there is interest here. And I think trips, I mean, obviously we're coming out of the pandemic now. We are monitoring in our tourism surveys how many people are visiting Britain and visiting England. And one of the questions is asking whether they have any health conditions and impairments. So the UK government have this ambition for the whole of the UK to be the most accessible tourism destination in Europe. And we need to monitor that within real-term numbers. You know, how many more disabled people or less, if we go the wrong way, are visiting the UK. So that's a measure of success as well. And internally, you know, how many British disabled people are taking trips, because at the moment it's about 51% of disabled British people that say they haven't taken a domestic tourism overnight trip in Britain in the last 12 months, and that's compared to 40% of non-disabled people. So there's a gap there, and there's lots of reasons why disabled people don't take as many trips, but we want to try and obviously stimulate that tourism.
Great, thank you.
And
So-
if I may, Mark,
Yep.
Ross, I think it goes without saying that we would love to continue the conversation with you and the team about what we're doing, combine it with what you're doing. And I think it's a win-win. And I just love what you guys are doing, frankly. And let's talk more about that.
Cool, thank you. So,
Yeah, love to.
Neha, I actually haven't heard you speak yet, so I just want to check that your audio is working. And if it is, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Hi, everyone. Mark, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, great. So, hi, everyone. My name is Neha Arora, and I represent Planet Able, which makes travel accessible and inclusive for people with all types of disabilities and the elderly. And we started off as a travel service provider, creating accessible and inclusive destinations. And now we are creating global standards for accessibility and inclusion for the hospitality and tourism industry, which would be free for everyone to adopt, and followed by a certification, so that the businesses actually work towards becoming accessible and inclusive for, say, travelers, not just with who are wheelchair users, for travelers who are blind, deaf, autistic, or have any other sort of cognitive, psychosocial, intellectual, or any hidden disability or medical condition. So we're trying to complete the whole spectrum, which we feel has been lacking globally, because the understanding of accessibilities is always limited to a couple of disabilities which are more visible. So we want to start that conversation and the adaptation of accessibility across the spectrum and across businesses, so that at the end you don't need separate travel companies for disabled people. Everyone is accessible and inclusive, and everyone has the freedom of choice to travel the way they want.
That's fantastic. And can you tell me a little bit about the what you're doing to connect in with the industry? I mean, are there things that you're looking out for now as opportunities to connect that people might want to know about? Or have you indeed frozen?
So what we're trying to do is creating. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you. Sorry, we've got a delay. That's
Can
what
you
it
hear
is.
me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can you repeat the question that you just asked? I mean, if
Just
that's
asking
okay.
about where you go next, who you're trying to connect with to create this standard. How would that work in your mind?
Yeah, so the way we are trying to do is to have the stakeholders of the industry as co-creators. So representative from the airlines, from the hotel industry, from the museums, or any other, like the restaurant and cafe associations, or the hotel associations, and anyone who plays a part, whether it's transport or accommodation, or as an experience provider in the hospitality chain. And they are the stakeholders. And we have to work with them, because some of the people have run really good work. I mean, there are airports who have created sensory spaces for people with sensory disabilities. But these places are like working in silos. You have just few good examples across the world. We are trying to bring all these people, like people who have done the good work and people who have not done anything, on the same table to learn from each other and can create these best practices, adapt them to the cultural and the geographical demographics in which they will be implemented. Because what works for US doesn't work for India. What works for UK doesn't work for Indonesia. So every country has its own accessibility challenges, and you need to adapt your standards also accordingly. So we're trying to create that common table on which we work together to create these standards, which are adaptable by all. It's like a common global framework. Because even if we have the laws, I mean, we have the ADA, we have the equality law, we have the European disability law, but they're not talking to each other. An airport could be amazingly accessible, but the moment a person who has a disability reaches the aircraft gate, it breaks because their legal liability is done. So they're not bothered about the customer, really. It's not disabled person focused. It is more focused on saving their, sorry about the language. It's now saving themselves from the legal, being a legal compliance. So it's more focused towards that instead of focusing on the traveler. So if they follow a common framework, they would be in sync and they would be talking to each other.
Cool. Well, it's a hugely ambitious project. I know that. And I know that you've got a huge amount of energy and passion behind it. Is there a link that you can share in the chat for people to see more about what's happening? Is there ways that they can give you support and connect in particular, just in terms of the particular sort of progress you're making now?
So we are still in the process of getting things together. So maybe in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have the links ready. I'll share it with you, and perhaps you can share it forward with the community.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Until then, they can reach out to planetable.com to get their updates.
Fantastic. Well, Ron, I'm going to come to you. In terms of the travel company that you represent, you guys have obviously already decided this is important, and I know you've done some incredible work to accommodate disabled people on the cruises. Can you just tell us a bit about that, but also particularly the why is interesting, I think, for us today. A little bit about how the company has responded to it, but also what you saw as that groundswell and where it came from and why they're responding in the way they are.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Do a sound check. You can hear me, correct?
Can.
Okay, perfect.
There's a little bit of echo. Has somebody got a? It might be me.
Okay. So thank you very much for being here today. I think that, when I talk about Royal Caribbean Group, the company that I'm representing, there's 5 global cruise brands, Royal Caribbean International, Celebrity Cruises, most of you will know those. Silver Sea Cruises is our luxury cruise brand. And then we also have a part ownership in TUI Cruises and Happily Lloyd Cruises, which cater to the German market. And we're a global cruise line. So that's a thing that we have to keep important because, we seem to kind of talk about being US-centric, but, really, again, global cruise line and catering to guests that could potentially be over half of our guests on board our ships. And, when we talk about disability inclusion at our company, we talk about not just the marketplace and taking care of our guests with disabilities. That's my forte. That's what we do really well. But we've expanded disability inclusion to other, pillars in terms of making Royal Caribbean a great place to work for employees with disabilities. For the past 5 years, we've been named the best places to work for disability inclusion by Disability In and American Association of People with Disabilities. And that's a record that I'm proud of. For the past 3 years, we've scored 100% on there. Just because you score 100% doesn't mean you're perfect, and there's still lots and lots of work to do. I know that's particularly of interest to this audience. We also look at digital accessibility and providing, making sure our websites and mobile apps are accessible. And, we all talk about disability inclusion being a journey. This is travel and tourism. We always talk about the journey is what's important, not actually when you get to the destination. And then the fact is destination is never a finish line. It is always like the finish line keeps moving, and we always keep getting challenged to do more and better things for disability inclusion as we go along. And the other last pillar that I talk about supplier diversity is we talk about wanting to do business with other companies that are disability owned. And then some of the really great things that we do for our guests, we just announced Icon of the Seas, our latest ship in the Royal Caribbean. It will have 50 accessible rooms in a variety of categories, where I'm proud to talk about the fact that we'll have 4 accessible suites, and one of which will be a top suite in our star class, which, in Royal Caribbean, we've got Royal Suite program. There's 3 different tiers. The top tier comes with genie service. It's almost like it's a class of an honor. It's not just a butler service. It's genie. It's like we make your wishes come true. And so really, ever since Royal Suite program, our guests with disabilities have been clamoring and asking for a top suite with genie service, because today we don't have one, but Icon, we're going to have that. And more of our staterooms will occupy a third or 4 guests, which is great for families and caregivers. So just really, I could talk all day, but those are some of the highlights that I wanted to share with you today about what we are doing and leading the way for disability inclusion in accessible travel and tourism. I think, Mark, you're muted.
Yeah, saw a presentation where you went through in a lot more detail. There just is so much stuff that you're doing in the ships, and I think that's really impressive. Are you seeing a knock-on effect in the industry generally, or from your seat, do you see other providers sort of taking stock of what you're doing, seeing the competition you're creating, and the ripple effect of them having to up their game as well?
Yeah, I've been in the disability inclusion business for a long time, and I know I'm dating myself, but I think the opportunity is that not just the cruise industry that's becoming more accessible. There are other aspects of the travel industry. I'm part of the CEO of Action, accessible travel subcommittee, which has been led by Expedia Group, and I'm hosting the next quarter meeting. And there's a lot of different companies represented. So you're seeing, Fred has talked about, and other people on the call talked about, hotels and tour operators are starting to see the value of, what you may call in the UK purple pound, and really the disability dollar, and say, the money is the same. And if you cater to the disability market and meet their needs, they will continue to be loyal to you. That's one of the data points that we do find is that we have more guests with disabilities that are loyalty members than those without. One of the things that you guys may know, we have our award-winning Autism Friendly program that we launched over 8 years ago. Every year since we've launched, we've doubled the number of guests with autism in their family sailing Royal Caribbean. And that's a really clear, bona fide business case that I can point to, say disability inclusion works, then it impacts your bottom line. So, and it's not just us. We were at the forefront of the autism friendly initiative over 8 years ago. Now everybody's doing retail stores, hotels, theme parks. They're all vying to be autism friendly because they want a part of this market.
Thank you. That really demonstrates, like you said, the business case is there very clearly for you. And I think it's a part of this session is also just demonstrating to people that there's a real business here that you need to explore and that it's worth exploring. And that is a global business as well. So that's even more exciting in terms of the business opportunity. Claire, let's take a slightly different turn in the road. You're also a disability ambassador, and you're representing something very different to a cruise ship line. Could you tell me a bit about the work you do and also some of the views that people have that you're working with around accessibility and travel?
Sure. I just want to start by following Ross's good practice guidelines here by explaining that I'm a 65-year-old white woman with a mop of white curls on the top and a spectacularly stylish pair of cat's eye. So that's how you can envision me. Black and white top on, very one-dimensional person. Me. Yes, I'm a disability and access ambassador, nominated by the Cabinet Office. I think they might have thought I was more diplomatic than I am, but I'm really not. And I represent people who are trying to catch buses and coaches mainly, although we do also do some work with trams in Scotland. for reasons that are too boring and arcane to go into. However, there's a huge divide between those two modes. We use bus for local transport, and nearly everyone at some point has to use a bus, and it's a key. It's a key access to everything for most people, including those who've got a car. Most places, it's more difficult to take a car than it is to get the local bus. It's cheaper to catch the bus, and since 2013. It's been a requirement of law that buses are accessible. Now, it's again, it depends who defines accessible and what your accessibility needs are. Coaches, however, have been whirling around in a mess of legislation and requirements and exemptions that have yet to be resolved, despite successive governments' attempts. Now, I say successive governments, that can be 3 and 6 weeks in this country, but let's move on from that. But we are still, I think we're on our 4th disabilities minister since August. Ross might tell me otherwise. But we still have a problem with excursion coaches being accessible. If you're catching a scheduled coach, I mean a high-speed coach that goes every day at midday from London to Edinburgh, whatever, that has to be accessible. But if you're booking a coach to go on an outing, to go to some tourist area, that does not have to be. And that's ludicrous, obviously. When you look at people who go on coach holidays, the typical image one has is people who are a little bit older, and acquired disability in old age is very, very common. But they're not catered for. I mean, not like it's worth a lot of money, as people have already pointed out. John mentions 15.3 billion expenditure by disabled people on holidays in the UK. Never mind the family, just the disabled people's expenditure is massive. So it's completely insane to ignore this part of your market. And there are good reasons for it, which we won't bore you by getting into. But the buses and coaches in a lot of people's heads are the same thing, but they're not. And so it's way beyond time that coaches caught up with, and the government needs to do its bit to force this in the UK, to make sure that all coaches have to be as accessible as all buses have to be. The other problem with this, of course, is that a lot of accessibility comes down to digital accessibility. And if you'll pardon me getting on my soapbox about this, it's all well and good. And I'm not saying that digital apps and digital options and digital solutions haven't made a huge difference to a lot of people. It's been great for lots of folk, but actually it's also every new opportunity that comes along tends to put up a new barrier for some people with some disabilities. So if you think about in the UK, there's 1.5 million people in the UK have a learning disability. And 350,000 of those are classed as a severe learning disability. Now, when you consider how many of those people may also be unemployed and therefore on a lower income, and then you expect them all to suddenly magic up a smartphone and learn how to use it, this is a real barrier for an awful lot of people, which nobody's quite overcome yet. And personally, I don't think there's enough attention paid to this particular issue. I always come across as a complete kind of Luddite that wants to smash technology on this. I don't. I love technology. Give me a gadget, I'm a happy woman. But it's not fair to expect all your customers to do all that work for you when you want them to use your product, to use your services, and to come on your journey, which everybody wants. Journey. Okay, great. Your journey is probably not just going to be a bus. You'll get from the bus to the train station, from the train station to the
Has Claire's sound changed for everybody, or is it just me?
Oh, is
Claire.
that?
Speaking of technology,
Yeah, you're back now in the room, I think.
I'm glad. I'm leaning forward rather than ranting and raving in my
It's
own.
it's the hand waving that did it.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm Welsh and Irish. It's just not a good combination for when passion gets involved. So I think the multimodality of every journey is also a big problem.
Yeah.
Because as Neha was talking about, everybody's responsibility stops as soon as their passenger moves from their particular mode. Now, we've been screaming about this in no uncertain terms for a very long time, and we're about to pick up a piece of research on this very issue with a load of disabled people, younger people, whose journeys get messed up part way through. And I think what everybody who's trying to sell a product needs is for their customer to have confidence. Confidence not just in their product, but also in their ability to complete their journey, to get where they want to go. As Ron said, to get off the ship and enjoy the experiences they're looking forward to on shore, and then get back again and not get stuck halfway up the volcano that Tony wants to stick thread into. Didn't talk about getting him out again, did you? I'd worry about that if I were you, Fred. So I think multimodality is really important. But most of all, it's confidence that people can actually access the services you're offering in any shape or form they need to make it happen. There are legislations in place that require that, but it's not very well policed and it's not very well complied with.
Cool.
I think
it's really good to take that whole picture, because as you say, there are going to be weak links in there, and to some extent the legislation is there. And I'm guessing in your role as an ambassador, you're spending a lot of time with your with your minister of the week, thinking about their role as government in implementing, policing the legislation, not necessarily creating the legislation from what you're saying. It's much more about it actually joining the dots between the various elements in a way that they're drawing a line. We've done the minimum, hand it on to the next sort of chain, link in the chain. Heather, I'm conscious probably for Skyscanner that you do have that chain in mind, that's very much what the person using Skyscanner is looking for, that whole the whole journey, that from the initial research through to actually arriving. Can you tell us a bit about what Skyscanner is doing, and also a little bit about the work, that sort of accessibility that you're working on, and the information resources that are part of what you offer?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather. I am a white female who never discloses her age. So I have blonde, shoulder-length hair, wearing glasses, and a beige Goldie top. So yes, I'm the accessibility lead at Skyscanner, and we're an online global travel brand. So when we're talking about products, our product is very much our website and our apps. So we focus on trying to make those products as accessible, as digitally accessible to our travelers as possible. And so I guess the journey you're talking about and all of those touch points, yeah, there are so many. When you break it down, there are so many areas that people can face barriers. We're trying to get that early stage of thinking about a trip, planning a trip, booking a trip. We're trying to get that as straightforward and as easy as we can for all of our travelers, including our disabled travelers. So yeah, Mark, we've worked together for a few years now. So when we first started the accessibility journey, that was 3 years ago, and we have done a lot of work since then. And I would say, you used to call me the lone evangelist, which is quite funny how far we've moved on. I really feel that now accessibility is really embedded into our culture, or at least becoming very embedded, which is amazing. And a few things I can talk about that point to that. One being where I sit in the business. So I came into the design team. I was managed in that area. I moved over to engineering. I moved back into design. Nobody really knew where to put me. now I'm reporting directly into the Chief Product Officer, which for accessibility and where it stands in the business is just phenomenal. So delighted about that. We have a growing accessibility champions network, which we restructured back at the beginning of this year. And I'm so excited about this. I could talk about this for days, so I won't. But we restructured it from a big group of passionate people into more smaller kind of pod areas that focus on the work in their area. So we have an engineering pod, we have a product makers pod, an internal pod, and a marketing and comms pod. So our champions are split into these groups. We all come together as well, but there's so much more activity happening in that now because we have these dedicated areas. And I think one of the huge things as well about it embedding into the culture is that we now have, everyone in Skyscanner has to fill in their commitments for the next 6 months, and they discuss these commitments with their manager. We now have a row in this commitments template that says, okay, what commitment are you going to work towards belonging and culture in for the company? For example, be an active part of one of our networks, as in my network. So this is fantastic, because what it means is it's no longer this additional volunteering thing. It's actually now going to be embedded into people's roles, and I am loving this. So this is just being rolled out at the moment. So I'll need to update you on how it goes. But the fact that the business have gone, yes, we want everyone to do this. We see the opportunities, the benefits of this, and they're letting that happen. So, we're so delighted about that. In terms of our work that we've been doing, there's so much happening now. I don't know about all of the activity that's happening, which is a great thing. It just means there's lots of it. It's challenging. We've got 600 engineers in 60 different teams across the world. This is hard to embed best practice into their processes when their processes are all slightly different. So that, there's definite challenges. But a couple of the big things we've done, we realized our brand color palette, which was lovely and colorful, actually it was causing us quite a few accessibility issues, and 26% of the issues of accessibility issues we found in our app were down to color. And we thought, not really good enough. So we've actually, rather than trying to solve that problem within the product, we have redone the color palette, and we're just rolling that out just now. So if you go onto Skyscanner, you might see things start to change. But the fact is that our new palette is accessible, and we have beautiful rules around it and guidance on when to use certain color combinations. And it's really lovely. And we have just redone our search controls as well. So anyone listening, please go on and test them out. And if there's any problems, let me know. They're very new, but the difference between what they were like and what they are now, we're feeling in a much more confident place that they are much more accessible than they were. And just lastly, just wanted to say as well, I talk about doing empathy labs because I feel it's such a great way to get through to our staff about learning about different disabilities, letting people try and feel what it might be like for someone with a disability. And we just ran our first one in our office in Shenzhen, which is in China, which is it's hard to explain what that means to me, but that means a lot to me that we were able to host something there. And yeah, it was run by one of our amazing accessibility champions, Gert-Jan. And he had so many volunteers helping him. The feedback from the day was amazing. Disability is not talked about in the same way in China as it is here. It's certainly not talked about enough. So this is a real cultural difference that we are trying to respond to and try to work out how to best share this information, with our China team. And it went really, really well. So I'm so excited about it. And just in terms of what we're working on now, we've been doing this for 3 years. We are by no means great. There are still a lot of accessibility fails in our products, we know it. But what we have learned is for companies like us, it's such a massive opportunity. Ross, you've talked about it. Claire, you've talked about it as well. Being insane that people don't think about this. It is insane. It's such a huge opportunity. So when people come into Skyscanner, travellers, most of them are then taken out into one of our partner websites. So they come on, we show them all the options, and then they click through to an airline, an online travel agent, another partner to actually do the booking in most cases. Now, through our research, when we've been testing with disabled travellers, okay, they're getting on fine in us, but then they click out through to a partner site and they know instantly that there's a difference in the levels of accessibility there. We don't want that. We really want that early digital journey anyway to be as accessible as possible for everybody. So we're going to try and help our partners kick off an accessibility program or boost any existing accessibility work that they're doing. And we're creating a microsite at the moment with all our resources on it, our strategy, our business case, our training, our guidelines. Here's what we've got. Please use it, or at least have a read. And then I'm going to hopefully be running some seminars or some live events next year for our partners to come along to, just to get that ball rolling. Because I think when we started this at Skyscanner, we weren't meaning to exclude anyone. It's just because people didn't know about it. So even if we can just get that conversation going, tell people what an opportunity it is that they're missing out on commercially. Plus, well, obviously the moral standpoint is, of course, it's the right thing to do. If we can get that message across to our partners, that early stage of travel, that planning part, that booking part, will hopefully become so much smoother. Oh, you're on mute, Mark.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think, as you say, there's a groundswell, and the other thing I'd say, of course,
Mark, you're on mute.
I'm
I can hear him.
not. I'm not. I don't think
I can
I am.
hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me, Heather?
Yeah.
Fred, you can't hear me. No, he can't. So that's a different reason, I think. So I think the digital first element of what you're talking about is obviously very different to the previous sort of elements. So I think it's interesting that is the direction of travel in the industry generally, that people are becoming more aware of disability. Clearly, with Claire's point, there are going to be travelers in certain parts of that journey process who are not being catered for, particularly in the divide between the two, and then potentially for legal reasons. But over the overarching picture here, I think, is of a change that's happening in particularly in tourism, maybe slightly different in travel, just to distinguish between them. But certainly the commercial imperative in tourism is being taken up. People are understanding and recognizing that. Perhaps the weak link, Claire, is actually the link into the travel, the day-to-day travel almost, that forms part of that mosaic. And that's the thing that I think is, as you're saying, the thing that needs to be addressed potentially by government as much as anyone to make those joins more meaningful. And then in terms of the sort of on the ground activity, Ross, the stuff you're saying, and also Heather, you mentioned this as well, is actually there's a huge ecosystem you're trying to reach into there to nudge into the next sort of provider. And I was struck, Ross, when you're talking about people who are running a bed and breakfast, micro business, small organization. What are they going to take away from a conversation like this? How do they turn that into something practical? And the guidelines and the standards you're talking about now, those have to be available and broadly promoted, and we need to find ways of making sure people see some of the basics. The other thing I would do in summary as well is mention that we've all touched on this, I think, and it's important to point out that I think people's view of accessible travel probably at best represents wheelchair users and people in wheelchairs traveling and tourism. That's probably people's mental image for lots of stuff we do around disability, and in this area in particular, I suspect it's about ramps and it's about the actual physical accessibility of a particular building. Whereas, of course, Ron, some of the stuff you're talking about that you're doing in ships is a mile away from that. Whole different world of accommodation and accessibility features that you're considering and building into a modern cruise ship. And you're building that way into the future. They're hugely expensive, and it's not just about having a level access to a particular space. It's way beyond that. So those are the changes that are happening in those industries at the same time. So, as we expected when we talked this through earlier, we have very comfortably fitted our conversation into the space available. It's fantastic hearing such a mixture of opinions and ideas. Fred and Tony, let us know when the show is around.
Looking for partners.
Yeah. So we need a link in that case, Fred. We need to know where we can get in touch with you. And Ross as well. You've put some stuff in there about the stuff you did with Channel 4, and that subsequently, turned into other things. This is clearly a piece of entertainment, as you said, Tony, that you think that the eyeballs will attract. And your daughter being an example of someone who finds that content great to watch, really engaging, wants to see some more of it. That's all part of that story of it becoming more mainstream, isn't it? Claire, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Mark. Before we disappear on the very small scale issue of local B&Bs and that kind of thing, they actually have the advantage of scale on their side for once, in that a small business can actually do a lot more with a lot less. And so they are in a position where they can make rooms calm places to be. Really be kind of soundproofing to make the place a place of sanctuary for people with various issues. Diverse people who really can't take it when there's a lot of noise, or just grumpy like me who much prefer it when it's quiet and lovely in their room than this massive soundscape that everyone wants to give you in every shop, every mall, every high street these days. Christmas comes where you having to walk anywhere without jingle bloody bells belting in your ear. So I do think they have an opportunity that it will cost them a lot less to make a space in their room which is quiet and calm, and that will help quite a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I think something we're taking away. We need to reconvene. We need to start sharing resources. AbilityNet wants to tap into the networks. I don't know whether there are networks. We haven't come across a huge amount of joining up around this issue. It's clear that Neha's thinking grand vision. Ross, you might be about to tell me that there's such networks are out there and we should have more connections into them. But I would like to make sure that we do. I was just going to say, I would like to make sure that we finish at 4 because the other session starts at 4. So if I can wrap up and ask, what I'll do is I'll circulate around. If anybody's got links and resources, particularly about networking, finding the links between things, can we make sure that we share that around afterwards, and we'll put that back out onto the platform. But the session, I can see the session's nearly starting at the moment. So I'd like to finish at this one so that you can jump over to the ROI. We've obviously had something to say about that as well. But thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. And for all the different contributions, which just showed how rich this story is and how much more there is to be explored. So thank you all for that, and for adding to TechShare Pro with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mark. Good luck to everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.